Hey, welcome to our journey through spiritual rhythms, what it looks like to practice the way of Jesus at Wellspring. Hopefully you're finding these videos helpful, whether you're in a well community and processing with a few friends or processing with your spouse, a coworker, or whatever. We're hoping that these videos are a helpful way for us as a body to learn what does it look like to practice the way of Jesus. Check out this one. Hopefully it's helpful. Talk to you soon.
Well, we're here together. We wanted to take just a few minutes just to talk about some of the core practices as far as what does it mean to follow Jesus. In particular, silence and solitude and Sabbath. So, super important, but, what is that? Why even talk about it? What does that even mean for us as followers of Jesus?
Yeah, in the last few weeks, I read this book by John Ortberg. In one of the chapters, he talks about this conversation he has with Dallas Willard. So John Ortberg, right, he's a writer, he's a pastor. He was in Chicago. This was about 2 decades ago. So he's younger. He has some kids running around. His life feels chaotic. He's calling a spiritual mentor, trying to say, hey, I need some help. Right? Dallas Willard is the head of USC's philosophy department. He's also just a wise follower of Jesus.
Sure.
Calls up. He's like, hey, Dallas, can you download some awesome info, help me so that I could live healthy and faithfully, all this, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, all right, Dallas, give it to me. And Dallas is known for these pauses. And Dallas is like, pause, and then he's like, all right, John, you must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. And John's like, awesome, nugget, write it down, feeling good.
Sure.
And he's like, what else? He's got an hour. He's like trying to cram it in.
What else is there, right?
Another long, classic Dallas Willard pause. He's like, there is nothing else. Which when I read it the first time, I was like, whoa, really? Nothing else?
Right.
Come on. There's a whole Bible. There's a lot of pages,
totally,
It wasn't like this sort of quick Twitter comment.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of this funny moment. And then I started to think about it. And I was reading, actually, Luke 5 this morning. And what stood out to me in Luke 5 is, so this is 5:15 and 16, right? 5:15 reads this way. But the news about him was spreading even farther. So all these people are talking about Jesus. Mm-hmm. So the news is spreading, right? This is sort of rural gossip culture, news travels fast. We think it travels fast here, right?
With Twitter and all
that. Yeah, you get into a village, man, gossip is fast, right?
Yeah.
So news is spreading. There's these crowds gathering to hear him and be healed, right? Mm-hmm. So there's people that are desiring to be with him.
Yeah.
And there's this huge need. There's people that are sick that are coming. They want to hear what he has to say about God.
Sure, yeah.
They're sick. Imagine your child's sick or you're bringing your elderly parent. And in the midst of this massive need and this huge opportunity, this is what Luke says, verse 16. But Jesus himself would often slip away to the wilderness and to pray.
Yeah.
Right? So in the midst of need and opportunity, he decides, I'm going to slip away.
Yeah.
I love that sort of phrase. Right? He's just going to slip away. And where does he go? He goes to the wilderness. Right? He's not going with people.
Yeah.
Right? He's going into places where it's quiet. He's alone. He's with the Father.
Yeah.
He slows down into the Father's presence where he connects. Right? He prays. Right? Prayer is connection to the Father, connecting to God, responding to the spoken word of God. Right? And what does Jesus do? He withdraws in the midst of the chaos, right? That we all experience.
Totally,
modern American life on the peninsula, everywhere, is chaotic.
Chaotic, yeah.
What does he do, right? In the midst of his chaos, opportunity and need, he withdraws.
Yeah.
And it reminds me even of when I was in Israel, and you'd go to these famous spots. You'd go to Galilee, right?
Sure.
You're like, whoa! If I'm going to be with God, this is where it's going to be. Or you go to
right there, right?
go to Jerusalem, and you're like, oh my gosh, But then we would talk to these rabbis, and the rabbis would consistently, just time and time again, they would talk about, actually, no, throughout history, people that were seeking God, the prophets, they always went into the wild places.
Yeah.
And so you see this in John the Baptist.
Yeah.
You see this in Jesus in his temptation narrative before he begins ministry.
Sure.
Wild place. Paul, upon his conversion, goes into the deserts of Damascus.
Yeah.
So you have this feeling of there's something about removing ourselves from the mesmerizing rhythms of our culture. Mark Laverton has that quote, right? It's removing ourselves from the mesmerizing rhythms of our culture in order to connect with God, that we can be rooted in who God is.
Oh, yeah. No, that's good. Yeah, I even think of when you're talking about Luke 5 there, Jesus had that pattern in his life to withdraw. but he also invited his disciples, right, his apprentices, to that exact same pattern. There's that line in Mark's gospel where he says to his apprentices, "Come away with me to a lonely place."
That's good.
Right? It's that same kind of phrase, the wilderness, the lonely place.
Yeah.
You know, you need that time away. It's not just about going on doing the next mission trip or the next miracle or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and it's patterned in our lives after
good.
Jesus. He invites his apprentices, you know, to do the same. And I even think, too, that establishing those patterns, those rhythms, it's rooted all the way back. Page 1 of Scripture, right? We're talking about silence, solitude that relates with Sabbath, right?
Yeah.
Rest and finding our rest in God. But the Sabbath, you know, first 6 days God creates, Genesis 1. But then day 7 is that day of rest. And that kind of instills this pattern into the universe, the world that God creates. And that man is given this gift now of rest. You know, I was even just thinking about it. The first full day that man exists is, you know, they're created on day 6.
Day 6, same with cows.
Right, yeah. But the first full 24-hour day, if you will, is a day of rest. We begin, you know,
resting in the presence of God.
Yeah, totally.
That's good.
And even how that began to become the pattern for God's people, the Sabbath.
Yeah.
You know, it's given in the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20. There, it's rooted in that command in the creation story.
Yeah.
But then, as Israel's story progresses, in Deuteronomy after the Exodus, those commands are given again, but this time, the command for the Sabbath, the invitation of Sabbath, is rooted not in the creation story, but in the Exodus story.
Yeah.
And how God delivered his people out of slavery, out of oppression,
into freedom,
right? And so now this becomes a rhythm into more of God's freedom, more of God's life, out of those, you're mentioning mesmerizing patterns, out of the mesmerizing patterns, if you will, of, say, Pharaoh and the oppressive way of living, into this new way of living.
And yet so often, like as we're talking with people here at Wellspring or just around, you know, rest almost feels like sort of another boulder to put to like the already overflowing, I don't know, workload, burden that we carry around. And so often I feel like, you know, when I used to work in the group homes back in the day, we used to go to Hometown Buffet. And it was this experience of the
my
kids
favorite spot going
there you go. The kids would come in and they would just load up their plate. And you'd be like, hey, get a green on there. And they'd like grab a single pea and put it on top like a cherry. But it was this sort of moment of like, dude, that is how we live our lives. It's this massive buffet and we just load stuff on there. And then we feel overwhelmed and we eat it and we feel sick.
It's too much.
It's too much.
Overload.
Instead, right, like rather than sort of saying, okay, we're going to include rest and God and time with God onto our already overflowing plate, rather God is including us in his life. We have an opportunity to actually have rest be one of the first things, and then we build like reasonable things around it. One of my things that I often notice just in ministry is that people are really good, like if you give them a to-do list, they'll rock it. Like boom, 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 you know? But if you give them a stop doing list, they're almost like paralyzed. Like, wait, what is that? I need to stop something?
It's so against the grain of American culture.
So, it's like so against the grain of accomplishment and performance. Oh no, I'm going to slow down.
Totally,
Yeah,
it's interesting. It's just, I think of just even, you're saying that, it's just so contrary to our culture. Yet so many wise followers of Jesus have said and testified to that rhythm of rest that Jesus did. I mean, can you speak of some of that? I think you mentioned Willard and Orford, but I think, you know, Mark Sayers, you've talked about withdrawal, return patterns. Who are some other like thinkers out there that have talked about some of these things? Yeah,
I mean, in the Jewish world, it's Heschel, but I think Sayers in Disappearing Church has this great frame. One of the things he talks about, like, if we are going to be an alive people, we have to have patterns of withdrawal and return. We need to have periods where we're removing ourselves from the mesmerizing rhythms of culture in order to slow down into the presence of God and actually be shaped into the image of God. We're going to be shaped into someone's image, right? In the culture, in the narrative, we're going to be shaped into someone's image. And as practitioners of the way of Jesus, better to be shaped in Jesus' image, right, than the image of, you know, Google or Apple or Netflix or whatever. It sort of reminds me just even of Jesus' words in Matthew 11, right? So he talks about sort of the yoke. He says, come to me who are weary and burdened, right? So that's us. Like,
Yeah.
we're struggling.
All of
We're
us.
doing life in a crazy way. And Jesus said, take my yoke upon you and I will give you rest, right? It's like, that's what we want.
Yeah.
But we're so resistant to doing the change of like, whatever, we have our hands full of 10 balls that we're trying to
Totally,
juggling
yeah.
and we have to take a yoke and like put it on our head and we're like, but I need to drop all my balls.
Yeah.
Like, yes, you
do,
do.
yeah.
Eugene Peterson says in Matthew 11, his translation is like, rhythms of grace.
Yeah.
Actually, these rhythms of slowing down, of Sabbath and solitude are actually ways that we experience the grace of God.
Yeah. And God's power and God's Spirit working in through us
Totally,
as
right?
we practice these things, right?
Yeah. So then, from a practical side, right, that's sort of big ideas.
Sure.
Like, how have you experienced in your life?
Yeah.
Like, these are like actual tips or practices or rhythms, right? We're talking about embodied realities.
Yeah.
Like, where does that hit the ground for
Sure,
you and
yeah.
your family?
Totally. I mean, it comes in like the rhythm idea,
Yeah.
right? So they're regular rhythms, and I think for us as a family, we start with like a weekly rhythm of.
Yeah.
For us, practically, that's like turn off the phone, no
Yeah.
email. That
So a
sort
bit
of
of a
thing.
tech fast.
It's tech fast, I think,
Yeah.
because our culture is so into the technology stuff.
You wake up in the morning
Yeah.
and the first thing you do is like, where's my phone?
Where's my phone? Check
Yeah,
Instagram.
yeah.
It's just like we're gonna not go into that, but just withdraw, right? The
Yeah.
word that you mentioned there, and have time as family with friends. Reading the scriptures, being together, those sorts of things. But it's a weekly rhythm.
Okay.
For sure. It's a few hours a day or a whole day. And then it becomes these, monthly, and we're trying to get to this. This has been harder for us.
Yeah.
But having, a full day where each of us, my wife and I, can totally withdraw and not, be around.
Like once a month?
Once a month. Yeah, we're
once a
working
quarter?
towards that. Yeah, it's harder.
Once a decade.
Totally, yeah. It's like with two little ones, it's really hard to figure, logistics
Yeah.
out with some of that. But definitely, it's the weekly, it's the monthly / quarterly kind of thing, and just building those in little by little.
Yeah.
And over time, the hope and prayer as you incorporate all the practices of Jesus, that you begin to be shaped into Jesus' image.
sense.
I don't know if that. What about for you though? Like, where does that connect?
So Jeannie and I, my wife and I, we from the very beginning of our marriage, we took Fridays.
Okay.
And we had a Sabbath. So when we were first married, before kids, we did basically the whole day apart.
Okay.
And then we would meet up for dinner, right? Because we had so much time together,
yeah,
different world.
Yeah.
And then with little kids, what we did is said, this is so unbelievably important for us that we decided, what we're going to do is we're going to split up Friday. So we're each going to have 4 or 5 hours.
Okay.
We're going to take time on our own.
Yeah.
A withdrawal or return pattern
Totally.
on the Sabbath, and then the other parent would be watching the kids.
Yeah.
So I think there's that. That's a massively important thing. I'll often go out to the woods.
Sure.
I'll literally try and find the wilderness.
Yeah. You're literally.
I started taking that more literally.
Yeah.
For me personally, it's really restorative. But I also think so there's the weekly. I also think there's a daily or even a way to break up a day. I just think we need withdrawal return as often as we can get it.
Totally. Yeah.
So if this is 15 minutes or an hour in the morning of being in the scriptures, removing from whether it's technology, being in worship music, if you play music, sort of entering in right brain, left brain, kind of stuff, slowing down into the presence of God. This is journaling. This is exercises in gratefulness.
Yeah.
So for me, it's sort of a morning evening rhythm. I'm kind of trying to lean into. And then trying to get to monthly or quarterly. Having more retreats, so this is 24 to 48 hours away by myself, or maybe with a group, maybe go on a backpacking trip with a couple guys that's out of the middle of nowhere, but you're away. Your cell phones don't work, but it's a way of sort of connecting maybe with others, but also just for myself, with God, outside of the mesmerizing rhythms of our culture. So I'd say daily, weekly, maybe quarterly, yearly, something like that, where we have these patterns of withdrawal, return, these patterns of Sabbath. We're actually enjoying and resting in God, and we're not striving.
Totally.
Where the grace that shaped so much of Jesus' ministry begins to shape us.
Totally. Yeah, and I think that's really important just to kind of maybe end on that. This is an experience of God's presence, invitation to God's grace. In our lives. This isn't a legalistic thing or a burden thing. This is, experiencing God's power and presence in our lives, making space for that so that we might become more and more like Jesus. Right? And that's the goal with all of these, is to see that happen
Yeah.
in your life and my life together as a
Yeah.
community.
Yeah. Well, and I would say though that sometimes when we start a new practice or rhythm, it's hard.
Yeah.
So like, if I'm going to start running, that first time I run, it's not very pleasurable.
Yeah.
I'm not used to
Yeah.
it. And the same is true with like practices of solitude and silence and Sabbath. That initially it actually might be like you might experience anxiety.
Yeah.
You might experience some worry. You might be like, "What am I doing?
What is this? Yeah. Because it's foreign. It's different.
Yeah, right.
Totally.
Dallas Willard once says like the way to tell whether you should do a discipline is how uncomfortable it is. And if it's super uncomfortable, you probably need more of it.
More of that.
Then
Yeah.
actually, so it's not like, oh, this doesn't feel good. It's like, no, if it doesn't work, there's probably like you're actually ill-fitting. You've been formed by the culture in such a way that you don't know how to slow.
Yeah.
You don't know how to rest. And then actually that's sort of a signal to you of like, whoa, maybe I should do this more. Not like, this stinks, I'm doing it.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Anyway,
that's good, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, at Wellspring, we want to be that kind of people. But it does take the risk of slowing. Of a stop doing list of like, all right, Jesus, I'm going to carve out a little time this morning.
Yeah.
I'm going to carve out a little time for Sabbath. And maybe it's 30 minutes this week, but you build up.
Yeah, you start little and build off that.
Yeah, don't be the guy who starts at the gym and is like, works out for 3 hours and in 2 weeks is done for the year. His year membership is wasted. Like, just lean in slowly. Like, we're in this to follow Jesus the rest of our lives.
Yeah, the long haul.
Yeah, not to sort of win a gold medal tomorrow.
Sure, yeah.
So,
Yeah, it takes little by little.
yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.